Good morning, everyone. Thank you for making it to day 2 and a 9 o'clock session. That's very impressive. I wasn't quite sure that 9 o'clock on the Friday morning was the best place to be. But you're all here, and we've got about 66 people online, which is quite amazing. So we have a big audience beyond this room, and I'm very keen. I'm Peter Samson from the Land Workers Alliance, and I'm chairing this session. I'm very keen to make sure that throughout our 19 minutes we keep the online audience in the room as well, if you like. So when it comes to discussions and questions, I'm trying to alternate. I will try and alternate, which might stilt the discussion in the room a little bit, but bear with me. And when it comes to questions and such, like, wait for the mic to arrive, because that's the only way they can hear what the questions are and the discussion points, if that's okay. You've come to the Woodshed and a session on joining the dots, infrastructure and such like. When I was in my sessions yesterday, I was just struck by how often the issue of infrastructure turned up. If we want a better food system, and I'm assuming that everyone here is interested in having a better food system and more regenerative farming, and to get away from the current food system that we're living in, we need to do more stuff of that, and we need more infrastructure to make that happen. I was in a session first thing about radical retail, which is a clear aspect of that. In the session about the sustainable food partnerships yesterday afternoon, infrastructure came up in all of the presentations from the people. What I would really like to get out of this session is a thought or a few thoughts about how we collectively can get to a point where we move to having that infrastructure in place. We do a lot of talk about it, but can we make it happen? And what do we need to do collectively and in our locality and across the nation and internationally, if necessary, to make that infrastructure resilient and appropriate for the food system that we want? So we will start with 3 different presentations, and purely by chance, we've got somebody talking about a fairly localised stuff, infrastructure work. We've got somebody who works on a London regional basis, and then we've got somebody who works on a national and international infrastructure projects. And we're going to start with Emma, who works for is a miller and works on Farm Eco community farm in Nottinghamshire. Then we'll have Sophie, who works for the Food Data Collaboration, which is the national project, and she'll be telling you about that. And then we'll finish the presentations with Danny, who's sitting next to me, and Danny is part of the Better Food Shed project business in London, which is distribution and collation and such like. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Emma, and we'll hear what you've got to say. Cool. Thank you.
So, yeah, hi, I'm Emma. I'm a miller and co-founder of the Nottingham Mill Co-op, along with 2 bakers, Kimberly from Small Food Bakery and Emily Lowen from Ambergoo Bakery. Today I'm just going to we'll give a really brief overview of our cooperative and how we got started. We're quite new, having launched about 18 months ago, so just hope to share some of what we've done so far and some lessons that we've learned. I guess the obvious point that Peter made is that we need more infrastructure if we're going to help small-scale farmers and bakers, in our case, trade outside of the commodity flour market, as at the moment the 4 largest companies account for approximately 2/3 of UK flour production. Kim, in her work at Small Food and UK Grain Lab has already done some really important work, in particular to build those relationships and small, short supply chains for all of the ingredients in her bakery and for the UK Grain Lab. But I think in order to expand and grow that network, and help new businesses develop, she realised that we needed more milling infrastructure to get people involved. I was an engineer, a relatively unhappy one, but a wannabe miller, and I met Kim. And then Emily was working with Kim and had ambitions to set up Hamburger Bakery and mill some of the flour for herself, for her bakery. And so we had kind of 3 people with 3 complementary but different aims that all wanted a mill but without the capacity to kind of get one themselves. And I suppose the other really important point for us was that the mill was in the city centre and it was visible to people that could see and could see it, and there it is in the window. And not just as a kind of heritage site, I suppose, but more as a really integral part of the process of how people get their bread. So yeah, there it is in the city centre of Hamburger Bakery in Nottingham. We crowdfunded for the mill, so even though we kind of came together as a 3, necessity really dictated that we crowdfund for the mill because we couldn't do it ourselves without putting unnecessary pressure on our businesses. Rent time and space on the mill in a really low risk environment. I'm the first product of that, but it could be farmer millers that want to kind of take flour back to their farm and sell direct, but it could be miller bakers like Emily's ambition. And then finally, kind of, and obviously with doing things like this, we want to expand the network and awareness, particularly in the East Midlands, so to grow that, but also in the kind of wider UK Grain Lab context. I've been asked to kind of touch on infrastructure gaps and difficulties, and I suppose the first thing that we're missing, while the mill is amazing, I do some work with Farm Eco Community Farm, and this is our first wheat crop from the summer, but we're missing lots of other infrastructure, especially on a small scale. It was very dry this year, so we didn't have to do any drying, but if we did, then we would have been in a mess. We've had to, these two pictures are us cleaning the grain and then cleaning it again because lack of experience meant that it wasn't clean first time round. And I'm not too sure that it's clean enough yet. And also, I think if we want to eat the whole rotation, I suppose, or just eat more interesting things that are more diverse than wheat. There are other kind of processing pieces of infrastructure that we would need. So de-hulling is a particularly obvious one if we want to eat more spelt or kind of processed barley and oats. If we need more mills, we don't have enough millers either. So skills and experience is a really obvious one. And I think that there's not as much relationship now between small-scale mill owners, industrial new mills like ourselves, and also the kind of traditional water and windmills. So I think we need to build up that bank of skills and experience. And we've been lucky enough to be part of a group which I'll kind of mention in a minute that was been totally invaluable. I think also within these kind of small networks, we need to make sure that we get the balance of how much, in our instance, grain is in that network. So one small farm can produce probably more grain than is needed for one mill and several bakeries. And so it's easy to get out of sync. So we don't want to flood the market with grain and then not have farmers really buy into that, but then not have any way of selling it. So we need to kind of do more discussion and agreement with that within our network. And also, I think, to provide security and longevity for projects like this, we need more community-owned infrastructure and buildings, and access. That's related as well to access to funding and grants. And then I just finally want to touch on some of the collaborations that have come out of the co-op and as part of UK Grain Lab that we wouldn't have been able to do without the project without setting these up. So the bottom two are kind of from a network of bottom two pictures are from a network of millers, other mill owners that we have been to see and are part of a kind of, through the medium of WhatsApp, a kind of support network of people that we're all new small mill owners and learning together. And we kind of joined that and it's been invaluable. So we're really grateful to that. But we were also able to bring Andrew, who's in the picture here, who built our mill over, so collect together enough money to bring him over to UK Grain Lab. And he did some demos, he did some stone dressing. And again, that was really invaluable, and it wasn't something that we'd have been able to do kind of separately. So it was really great to bring that together. A couple of points from the co-op is that Kim, through that relationship, Kim is selling rye from Emily's bakery, and Emily is selling kind of pasta and preserves from Small Food Bakery. And that's probably really radical for bakeries to sell each other's products, but it enables them to sell products that they wouldn't be able to fit into their schedule and offer their customers more choice, and that's kind of come out of the co-op. And also, I think, in kind of trying to expand the network of bakers, we've done some sensory exploration with some of the bakeries in Nottingham in conjunction with the University in Nottingham. And again, in a kind of traditionally competitive environment, we've kind of got them together to play, basically, and build confidence to use these different flours. And I think they've all found that really beneficial to be able to step away from their bakery and haven't found that difficult to share knowledge and experience and kind of grow together. So that's been really good. So I'll just finish by saying that it feels like it's really modest and we're kind of new only 18 months old. But through kind of creating the co-op, we've got one new miller, one new farmer that's converting to organic and growing interesting grains and selling direct, and 3 or 4 bakers and micro bakeries and like lots of other home bakers that are all using now non-commodity flours, and that's kind of the purpose, and hopefully in the future we'll get a lot bigger. Thank you.
For those of you who have come in a little bit late, welcome. It's really great to see you here. And I should have said this right at the start. Welcome to the people online too. We know you're there. Sadly, we can't see you, but we're really pleased you're here. Thank you.
Brilliant. I'm going to click and hope. Yes, brilliant. Fantastic. Hello, everybody. Great to see so many of you here this morning, and hello to everybody who's joining us online as well. My name is Sophie Paterson, and I'm the project coordinator at the Food Data Collaboration. So, joining the dots. These are the dots that we're hoping to join, really, between producers, distributors and eaters. And I'd just like to do a quick hands up in the room. How many food producers, growers, primary producers, secondary producers do we have in the room with us? Great, excellent. Any food retailers in the room? Yeah, okay, fantastic, a great mix already. I'm curious to know how many of you are selling online? Yeah, quite a few already. Any of you selling via multiple platforms? For example, Open Food Network UK, Ubi, a few of you? Okay, excellent. That's really interesting. So, in terms of this little loop that we've got going on here, we know that there are some real difficulties and challenges inherent in joining those dots at the moment between our primary and secondary food producers, our distributors of all different types, so online platforms, as I've already mentioned, farmers markets, food hubs, I know there's quite a few of those in the room as well, ethical wholesalers, and ultimately getting that great food out to customers of all different types as well, individual households, shops, procurers, and so on. We know from a producer perspective that there's a really big challenge at the moment. So for those of you that are trying to use multiple platforms at once to reach lots of different customers in lots of different ways, we know that you're having to manually maintain and update each of those product catalogues, and that takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of resource on the part of producers and retailers who are trying to do that. And also when it comes to logistics and distribution, we know that many businesses, although I think, Duncan, you mentioned in the Radical Retailers session yesterday that you're managing to really cover this problem quite well, but we know for lots of you as well, distribution routes are often running empty vans round and about as well. So there's all sorts of gaps and holes to be filled, which the Food Data Collaboration is really excited to be working on. The question, which really came through Lynn Davis at the Open Food Network UK, was this: what if the digital online retail platforms could talk to each other? And here we're talking specifically about data infrastructure, and that's a word which, Peter, you used at the beginning of this session already. We're looking at creating a digital infrastructure that will help to support physical infrastructure in the real world. So we're specifically talking about something called data interoperability, which is always a bit of a mouthful to say. More on that a little bit later. So, who's actually involved with this exciting project? We've actually got one of our technical partners in the room, Ubi. Pete's here from Ubi, so he's giving us a quick wave there. The project itself is a 2-year project currently funded by the National Lottery Community Foundation. It's running through until March 2024. We hope to extend that if we possibly can. And it's bringing together a number of technical platforms. So Open Food Network UK, Ubi, Big Barn, and we're also really excited that Humberdods are shortly going to be joining us as well. So there's going to be hopefully opportunity for more technical platforms to come on board as the project progresses. So that's very much an open call. If anybody is interested in learning more about that, you can visit our website, details at the end. And we're really building on the work, I should say, of the Data Food Consortium in France. So we're standing on the shoulders, really, of their work that's already doing this data infrastructure collaborative working together already. It's an interesting project, and I think going back to what Emma said about really championing collaboration over competition, this is really at the heart of the work that we're doing at the Food Data Collaboration. So it's a very, novel project. Maybe there'll be time for Pete to say a little bit about that during the Q&A, who knows. So our vision is, I'm sure, something that all of you in the room and those of you online can chime with. We want to be able to create an infrastructure that supports the agroecological sector first and foremost. So we want to ensure that this work is enabling a system that really provides a livelihood, a decent livelihood, from everybody through from farm to fork, and that ultimately more good food is reaching communities in need. So that is the vision of the Food Data Collaboration. The mission, I'm going to use that word data interoperability again. So we're working collaboratively to develop this data interoperability infrastructure, managed by collective and commons governance principles, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in a second. And ultimately, the aim of this is to increase the amount of food bought and sold through farmer-focused short supply chains, and ultimately to reduce barriers to deeper collaboration. So when we talk about data interoperability infrastructure, it's really a question of a few key ingredients. So governance, I'm going to touch on in a little while, so I'm not going to delve into that just now. The magic ingredient really is something called an application programming interface. And it's this which helps the platforms to be able to communicate with each other. And the sort of data specifically that we're looking to be sharing is not customer data, it's not anything sensitive, obviously GDPR, alarm bells ringing. We're talking about things like product data, stock data. So if a producer wanted to be able to say they had XYZ amount of eggs, tomatoes, cabbages, it's that information which they would be able to log into a single platform, upload all of that product and stock information, and that would magically, by the power of the API, and Gareth, our tech person in the room, will be able to expand upon that because I'm by no means a technical person. But by the power of the API, this data will be able to be accessed through the other systems as well, without having to log in individually to each of those platforms. So ultimately, we're looking to reduce that administrative overhead, give producers and retailers more time back to be able to do the more important work in life to make their businesses work. So there's all sorts of things involved in it, as well as making sure that this technical API structure is in place. It's also a case of working with things like ontology is something which the Data Food Consortium are heavily into at the moment. And that's making sure that we're describing our products in the same sorts of ways, that there's a coherent baseline, a coherent foundation through which all of these systems can interact using the same sorts of terminology. So it's a lot of work and there's lots to be done. But what we hope will come through it is a really useful tool that will enable producers and retailers to access a bigger market, essentially. The question, though, comes in, how do we govern this? How do we safeguard this new data commons to make sure that it is actually enhancing and protecting and really strengthening the agroecological sector, first and foremost? So we're really pleased that we have a core governance group already in place as part of the project. That involves real agroecological producers on the ground, Martin Bragg from Chillingford Organics, Bob Mayhew from the Apricot Centre, and we also have representatives from key sector organisations as well, Sustain, the Land Workers Alliance, and Better Food Traders, as well as, of course, our technical platforms themselves as well, so Pete, Anthony from Big Barn as well. And like I said, it's a novel project because it's really about developing that sense of trust between people who would normally be seen as competitors. And that's, potentially quite a difficult sort of square to circle. So we're really, really pleased that so many people so far have been really happy to take that risk. And we've been building that trust throughout, as you can see from the quote there from Pete. And here we have a quote from Tony, which I think illustrates some of the thorny questions. We know that this is going to be a potentially challenging journey. How do we make sure that what we're building is going to be strengthening the agroecological sector and isn't just a free-for-all that everybody could get involved in? Boundaries is really what it comes down to. And as Tony's noted here, if we set them too narrow, we don't get that scaling up and scaling out that we need this project to achieve. If we set them too broad, potentially we end up with something like Amazon, which I can imagine most of us in the room would probably prefer not to see. So it's a very difficult line to tread. This is why we've got our governance group in place to make sure that this data commons and the work that it will do into the future is going to be safeguarded to champion our sector. Ultimately, what we're hoping in terms of what we're going to be achieving in the next months and hopefully years, at the moment we're in our phase 1, which is looking to get this data interoperability working around product and stock data. So enabling the platforms to be able to share that data and be working, hopefully by March 2024, with some actual physical pilot rollouts planned in the southwest and possibly nationally with Hodmedod's as well, all being well. Then hopefully, subject to further funding, we'll move into phase 2, which would be our order interoperability, and that would mean that we'd be able to facilitate order consolidation across enterprises and platforms. The really exciting bit comes in phase 3, which is around logistics building in terms of distribution as well. So there's the potential for all of this data to then be able to function around logistics, distribution, deliveries. And again, we know that that's a real need for producers and retailers in the agroecological sector at the moment. So lots of work to be done, but potentially some really exciting outcomes. So if you would like to find out more, it's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour. This is how you can get in touch with us. I would say we do also have a research opportunity currently live, not for very much longer, but if anybody's interested in working with us around setting those boundaries and how we would monitor which sorts of businesses and the sorts of conditions that they might need to meet, the sorts of commitments they might need to make to be part of this new data commons, please do grab me for a chat afterwards. And yeah, we'd be happy to share more. Thank you very much.
It's me now. Right. Yep. Hello, everyone. My name's Danny. I'm from the Better Food Shed. So the Better Food Shed is. Do you know what? I've got some. Maybe I've got. I don't think I've got a presentation. I might have some pictures of a grubby warehouse. Anyway, right. So this is the Better Food Shed. We are a not-for-profit wholesale buying group that was launched by Growing Communities in 2019. We source fruit and veg at the moment from around 20 producers across the UK and supply predominantly community-run bot schemes and shops across London, as well as our local council now, in a way of sorts. I'll come to that later. So what were the dots that needed joining? So I guess you could separate out there were kind of two sets of dots, if you like. You had the immediate needs of the network of bot schemes and farmers that existed in and around London at that time. And then you also had a sort of, we realised there was sort of second set of potential more aspirational dots, if you like, that we could subsequently join together, which I'll talk about in a bit. So to the start, at the time, when we started first talking about the shed, which was around 2017-18, I was working at Organically, which is a workers' co-op based in Waltham Forest, London. At the time, they were supplying around 400 to 500 veg and fruit bags a week. And we were part of a network of independent community-led bot schemes operating across different parts of London. There were 9 schemes at this point, I think, and Growing Communities was the largest one in that group at the time. And they share a similar set of principles, all basically around committing to farmer-focused trade. So all of these schemes at the time were supplied by 4 or 5 farmers based around London, some closer than others, but all within a sort of viable van drive of London, and then also a large organic wholesaler based in the southeast. One of the issues that we had was, as all the schemes, back in those glory days when all the schemes were growing, we were getting bigger and bigger, and the farmers that we were using at the time weren't really able to keep up with our demand for veg. So that meant we ended up using this wholesaler language more and more, and sourcing a smaller proportion of our veg through our direct relationships. As a result, we had more of the problems that come with buying for a wholesaler, things like provenance, quality, freshness, price, that sort of stuff. So what we all wanted was to have more direct relationships with more farmers, so we could get access to more produce and potentially save a bit of money where possible. So by buying more produce direct from farmers, more of the money we're spending on produce is going directly to farmers, and also allowing us in a lot of cases to buy produce. The theory would be allow us to buy produce in a lot of cases for less money than we were getting via a wholesaler. So we also wanted to reduce as much as possible the emissions around our transport network. So, if you think about it, at the time we had 4 or 5 farmers and a wholesaler all crisscrossing around London, delivering to 9 separate schemes, none of it coordinated in any way. And then we also had this sort of aspirational set of dots that were needed around building alternative distribution systems, and particular in the case of London, building supply chains that could operate at scale. How can we feed as many people in London as possible with sustainable produce? It seemed like for us the obvious thing would be to start working with public sector organisations, schools, hospitals, councils. But to work with those organisations, you need to be able to, certainly in any meaningful way, operate at a certain scale. So that's something that we felt that we needed to build to access that market, if you like. So how do we do it? In essence, it's pretty simple. Each week we make a list of the produce that we get after we've spoken to all the farmers. So we have a list of all the produce we've got from all our farmers. We send that out to our box scheme buyers, our customers. They then tell us what they want. We put that all together into one order for each of our farmers, which we send out to them. We get it into London, to this delightful warehouse. Oh, look, there you go. There's another picture of the warehouse. And then once it's there, we sort out who's getting what, and then we deliver it generally in one consolidated delivery to each of the box schemes. That's it. I mean, it's obviously a little bit more complicated than that. And I think there are a few elements of what we do that I'd like to highlight, but they are all driven or governed by an overarching principle of being farmer-focused. So what does farmer-focused mean? So it means, it means lots of things, but I guess it means predominantly the farmers are valued more than any other party in our food system. So, and I guess this is the main difference between how we operate in comparison to conventional food systems, where the farmer is only one of many actors in the supply chain, and so generally as a result gets little or no consideration. What this means is there's a disconnect between the consumer and the farmer, which leads to 2 things. That the consumer is so many links away from the farmer that it's impossible for them to have any connection or know the farmer or value what they do. But also in a very sort of literal economic sense, the farmer gets a tiny portion of the value of their produce as a result. In practice, what that means is, so we do a few different things. So in particular, with our core growers, so those growers that were with us at the start that are based around London, we commit to taking as much of their produce as possible. So each week when we speak to our growers, we don't just find out what they've got, but we also talk to them about what they are particularly desperate to sell that week or have a lot of. And then this informs the conversations we then have with our bot scheme buyers. We have a managed ordering system, which means that when we put out our produce availability list each week, our bot schemes will order whatever they want, but often they will expect us to come back to them and ask them to change things, you know, to take more courgettes, less aubergines, or whatever it is that week that needs to go. And then we do that basically until we have an order that both the farmers and the bot schemes are all happy with. And that's kind of, and then we send it off and we do our thing with it. We also only buy to order. So we only buy from our farmers what we've sold, which means we don't create any waste in our distribution system. And because we don't stock produce and then waste it, we don't have to add a margin to cover the speculative aspect of wholesaling. So because there's no waste, there's no cost, as opposed to a conventional distribution system which has lots of waste in it, and obviously all that waste is priced accordingly. Yeah, it has a price in the system. We also place a heavy emphasis on cropping planning, again, to reduce the sort of wastage element. We do that each year, acting as a facilitator, if you like, between the bot schemes and the farmers to try and coordinate as much as possible who's growing what, both to ensure we have enough quantity and variety of produce to keep the bot schemes happy, while also trying to avoid everyone having exactly the same stuff or there being an oversupply of lots of the same veg. I mean, that is, you know, it's a lofty aim because we live in the UK and there's a pretty short season. So, but, you know, we try, everyone ends up growing the same stuff, but we try and coordinate it so that certain people will be focusing on things that suit their land and other people will be focusing on things that suit theirs. We don't haggle with our growers. We encourage them to price their veg to reflect their costs. We advise growers on pricing. We have a sort of open, pretty honest, frank conversation with them about that stuff. That's sort of ongoing, but that is as a result of the trust that we've built by operating in the way that we do with those farmers. So quite often that'll be started by them. They'll be like, well, what do you think we should be doing this for? How much do you think we should sell this for? And you know, and there'll often be cases where we'll tell them if we think they're not selling it for enough money. And margins. So margins, they exist only to cover our costs, not to make any extractive profit from the system. So as such, we run a tight ship to keep those costs low. You know, stuff comes in very quickly and goes out very quickly, so we spend less time, less money on labour, and all the other associated costs with having produce sitting around for a long time. You know, essentially lower costs mean lower margins. And we also rig the market slightly. So with our core growers or our local smaller growers, we generally tend to put a smaller margin on that produce. Generally, this is higher value produce anyway. And then we'll put a bigger margin on produce from larger farms. So, and that is generally lower value produce, things like roots, you know, the kind of the staples. So if you're buying more produce from those bigger guys, you will essentially be contributing more to our costs than if you're buying more from smaller growers. And this is sort of something we're quite upfront with everyone about. Yeah, so in terms of our governance model, we sit within growing communities, the largest bot scheme in that network. And they are a limited company by guarantee, which means that any profits need to be reinvested back into the company. And that prevents, obviously, that kind of extractive profit that I mentioned earlier on. I think most of the pros of our sort of thing, I think, hopefully have been covered by what I've already said. In essence, for the farmers, it gives them access to London bot scheme markets and we give them a level of support I know makes their lives easier, which allows them to spend more time growing veg, less time trying to sell it. And for the bot schemes, it's more produce from more farmers, generally for a little bit less money, and in most cases in one delivery. The most obvious sort of con, if you like, to the system is that despite that overall we remove lots of steps in the supply chain, we are still a step in the supply chain. So we do disrupt that relationship, I guess, between the buyer and the farmer. And we're aware of that, and we try to counter this in a couple of different ways. We try and pass on to the schemes as much of our communication with the farmers as possible, which we do each week with our weekly price list. And then we also have regular buyers meetings. So we have regular meetings with the buyers of the bot schemes, and often our farmers will zoom into it, and we'll have a little Q&A with them, which is quite a good way of keeping that relationship, that direct relationship going. And then I think the last question I was asked was, would we do anything differently, which is a tricky one to answer, really. I mean, in an ideal world, we'd have started with a lot more resilient systems. It's taken a lot of hard work to get to this point from everyone in our team. I think spotting opportunities to change things and acting on them quicker would have definitely helped at certain points, certainly in terms of staff well-being, you know, not working everyone to the bone. And then transport companies. So we didn't use any, you know, we didn't really use any transport companies when we first started, but they are an invisible but totally necessary part of the system. And if you don't have a good transport company, when I mean transport company, I'm talking about if you're buying a pallet from Yorkshire, you'll need someone to get it to you. You know, those people that aren't a viable van driver away will put their stuff on pallets and send it across. If you don't, because it's fresh produce, if you don't have someone that can do that well, then the whole thing doesn't work. And it's and we're really lucky now that we've got great transport companies, but it's taken a long time to get there. And if we'd have known that at the start, I think we might have saved ourselves a few headaches. Yeah, I think that's kind of it.
Good.
Sort of,
Thank you.
Yeah.
So many questions. If you'll allow me, I'll ask a question of each of my panellists, and then we'll go to online and then come back into the room. Emma, you mentioned milling skills, and you're a new entrant into milling.
Yeah.
How did you get those skills?
Trial and error, quite a lot of reading. We went to Hodmedod's have the same mill as us. That was that picture we went there before. But yeah, playing, and I had really crap flour for quite a long time. It was just, yeah, I think it's just, the mill's quite simple. There are 3 things that you can change on it, and it's just being confident in what those 3 things are doing. So it's how quickly the stones go round, how close they are together, and how quickly the grain goes in the hopper. And you're kind of playing the 3 off against each other. And it just, I suppose it's getting to a point where you want somebody to use that flour, and you're kind of confident enough to give it to them, but knowing that I've got probably decades of learning still to do.
But that's good. That's quite a good process, isn't it? I mean, if there's that much life skill to acquire, or work skill to acquire, I mean, that's a great thing to be working in.
Yeah.
That longevity of a skill, if
Yeah.
you like. Sophie, you mentioned boundaries, and then you hinted at this research opportunity. That suggests to me that you don't quite know how that's going to play out.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's a case of not wanting to reinvent the wheel, because we know that there's already various frameworks out there which would help us to define these things. So really looking for a review of what's already there. But equally as well, you know, what are there different ways that we could potentially be looking to classify and monitor ultimately, although what level is appropriate for that monitoring is, again, something which we need to work through. We don't want to give ourselves the unenviable task of having to do huge amounts of monitoring work if there's other tools out there and other frameworks out there that could already work. So yes, really it's just a case of seeing what might be able to be adapted or implemented in the context of the food data collaboration to make sure that everybody who's participating in this new data commons is as committed to supporting the agroecological sector as we all are so far.
And Danny, I could see how you, within the sort of growing communities world, could see the opportunity, and I could see where you've got to. But how did you find the cash to get this started?
So that was growing communities. That's kind of why we now sit within them, because a few of the biggest bot schemes got around the table, and we started talking about this idea, and growing communities were like, well, this needs to be done, so we'll put the cash up for it. So they,
out of their own resources?
Yeah, they used their reserves, and they put a chunk forward for us to crack on, basically.
That's one hell of a commitment.
Yeah, yeah. So they gave me a small pot to basically figure out whether it was possible to pay my wages, essentially, and then they gave us a 25 grand loan, interest free, which we paid back after we'd sort of got going.
Oh wow! But that's some trust in a way, isn't it? To make that happen. And I think that's one of the things that comes back through all of these presentations, the importance of developing trust and openness about communications and such like. I mean, I've heard that in all of the presentations. Yarli, how are we doing for questions online?
I can ask a couple.
Go fire away.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is there a roving mic? Sorry? We've got a roving
The roving mic, yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Thank you. So I think this might be a question specifically for you, Sophie. It's from Vic at Brighton and Hove Food Partnership. Vic says, how does this work on data sharing platforms fit with the work that DP UK are doing on dynamic procurement, i.e. linking local producers to large-scale catering contracts, for example, schools and university meals?
That's a really interesting question, and in fact I think we have initially been open to having a discussion with DP UK about the possibilities, because there is a bit of crossover there with our work. So absolutely, as the project develops, we do hope to be able to have those conversations. At the moment we're probably more so focused on the farmer to household customer and to possibly small retailer scale of things, but ultimately the infrastructure that we are building could be applicable in a much wider setting, a procurement setting. So absolutely, we're really open to having those conversations.
Thanks. Do we want to go to...
Yeah, let's see what. I mean, you'll have to forgive me for being a little bit blinded by the lights. Have we got any questions or comments in the room? Let's start at the back row there. You, yes. Hang on, if you can wait for the mic, then people online can hear us too.
Thanks. It's a question for Danny. I'm just curious how the system works in terms of numbers of customers and suppliers going up and down.
Well, so basically, the bot schemes obviously have their customers. What we do is we put a list out every Wednesday, and the bot schemes will put together. Basically, bot schemes have a Wednesday cut-off for sign-ups for the following week. So after a Wednesday evening, most of them anyway, some of them will maybe take a risk, but essentially, because it's a pretty stable model, the bot scheme model, numbers don't fluctuate massively from week to week. You can be pretty sure of your order or of your bot scheme numbers. So, we're talking about, I think, probably in total, there's about 4,000 households that are supplied through the network. So it's a quite, if it changes by 50 or even 100 bots, the system's big enough to be able to sort of take that fluctuation a little bit. But essentially, the bot schemes have a cut-off on a Wednesday night, which is when they place their orders for the following week. And so that allows us to place our orders then on the Thursday with all of our growers for them to come in at the beginning of the next week. If that makes sense?
It does, but what about if there's a new farmer that wants to join or a farmer leaves?
We don't really get farmers leaving, if I'm honest. it'll depend on what produce there is each week. Whether, you know, some farmers will obviously not have stuff all year round, so they'll drop out. But that, you know, so on that in that process on that Wednesday morning, we'll find out who's got what. And so if a farmer wants to put stuff on the list or not put stuff on the list, that's up to them. We then put that list out to all of our bot schemes, and then they choose what they want from it, if that makes sense.
And new entrants?
And if we have a new farmer that, I mean, generally we'll do quite a bit of chatting with them, but it's all, I mean, to be honest, it's quite a laid back process. If they want to if we speak to a new farmer, providing they're not, it depends on what kind of stuff they've got. But I guess if you have, if you had, you know, we won't take on a lot of new farmers because, well, certainly at the moment, with all the bot schemes generally tend to struggle in terms of they're all not growing. So we don't want to take on too many farmers to then not be able to look after the ones we've already got, essentially. In an ideal world, we'd be growing all the time, and then, you know, there was a point in the pandemic where if you had produce and you were a farmer and you wanted to sell it on our thing, I'd bite your hand off for it. But that's not where we're at now. So we have to be a little bit more careful about how we do things. And there's a balancing act between having enough of a range of farmers to make sure that you've got all the bases covered and keep your customers happy, but also really making sure the farmers that you've got in your system already are looked after properly.
Let's do another question online, if there is one.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions on food processing. So Diana Smith asks, will anybody be touching on developing food processing? I'm assuming she means in the presentations. The right kind of processing and preservation would help to prevent waste and open up the possibility of a wide range of projects. And Thomas also says, is anyone looking at developing local food processing hubs or any advice for a farmer looking at building one?
I think I'd quite like to hold those questions, because what I would, at some point, we'll take some more questions, but I want to come back to a question to the room, really, about how do we get more of what we've heard about and things like that, processing stuff. I mean, what do we need to do collectively and as different organisations to make some of that stuff happen? Because we do a lot of talk, but actually what we need is a route to get these things delivered on the ground. So let's come back to that. Let's have another question in the room, and I've got 5 hands. Because the mic's here, we'll just go to this one over here.
Hello. I work. I run an organisation called Kids Kitchen, and I just wanted to throw in this. We are like a really willing buyer, and we are actually in your area, Danny, and I'm not sure of the connections, and we've got a good relationship with Organically, and I was just kind of gonna just ask a couple of things about we want to get this produce, but we are not a household and we're not a box scheme. Mm-hmm. And I'm just really interested by all the possibilities that I'm hearing. But I was just kind of wondering to put in, like, when we are protecting growers, we're then narrowing the possibility for the buyer, which is what we want to do because we want to protect the grower. But just from the perspective of, I see receipts come to me because I'm not in that area, and they are supermarket receipts, and I'm forever going, and we're always thinking, how do we get more local? So I was just wondering whether there's ways that we can kind of plug some of those gaps with this really interesting wholesaler, like broker wholesaler thing that you've created.
And can I add to that? There was, in one of the sessions that I was in yesterday, there was somebody who runs a shop in London and was asking the same question. Can I get access to agroecologically grown food, vegetables in particular? And what's the route for me to get that? Because she's finding it ever more difficult to get things out of wholesale. Yeah.
And I'll throw one other thing in, because I thought it was really interesting that you've got that space, And actually, that food is not in that space very long, is it? Because you do most of it digitally, and then it comes in and goes out. And I was wondering what else could be done with that space on the times when there's no fruit and veg in it.
Okay. Well, so
Like another to do for you.
yeah. So I guess on the first thing, I mean, let's talk afterwards. Yeah. I mean, in terms of who we supply or how we, I mean, yeah, we just need to operate at a certain level, because we put on such a small margin on everything that, you know, I guess if you think about it, our general margin is about 13-14% in total, you know, or the markup. I get really confused between the two, but anyway. So on a £120 order, we make about 10 quid. That's not enough to cover fuel and petrol in any, you know, if we did like loads of those, the business model wouldn't work. We need that kind of size of order to be able to make it all add up. But I mean, yeah, I mean, we could, if you're buying a reasonable amount, it doesn't need to be a huge amount, and also it depends where you are. I mean, if you're in like northwest London, we're going to need a much bigger order than if you're round the corner in Barking. So yeah, it's like a case by case basis. But yeah, let's talk about it afterwards. And then in terms of the other thing, we're part of, so we're a bit, one of the things I guess I didn't mention is where our warehouse is. We're where we are because we have basically been given that space by a charity that operates in Barking and Dagenham. There's a giant warehouse there, which is a maker's space run by everyone every day. And they have more space than they need. So they gave us this little, I mean, it's not little, it feels little to me, but corner of the warehouse where we do our thing. I wouldn't have a problem with someone using it, but I've got absolutely no time or energy to, you know, get someone doing something in it. But yeah, I mean, it's there. It's usable. Yeah.
Let's take the mic to the back row, and the person, the second one in, green top. You had your hand up for a while, and then I'll come to you with the grey top on the third line in, and then we'll go back to online.
Yeah, good morning. I'm a farmer from Scotland and also a meat processor. Two questions I've got. One is, Danny particularly, how much dialogue do you have with the farmer in terms of their production plan to meet your demand at the other end of the scale? And are your farmers actually fully supplying you, or do they have other markets for their produce as well? That's just, if I can just fire the other one in as well. In terms of the data information, which really intrigues me, okay, you've got that little network between producer and the end user. What about producer to producer network as well? Because we've moved up in scale in terms of our meat processing, and we're building links with other organic farmers in Scotland now, and so we've got about 6 or 7 relationships. But it's also, when we're out of stock of certain products, be really useful to cross-connect with other producers that may have something available within this data network, and I can see that being a really fantastic tool for that.
Right. So in terms of so we do cropping. So with our core growers, the guys that are around London, we do quite a sort of lengthy cropping plan process with them, where we chat to them. You know, we go and visit them, and we'll literally run through a big list of things, and they'll say, "We're growing this. Do you want more or less?" And you know, we'll do that, and then they'll ignore what we say and grow what they want anyway. You know, but there is a lot of dialogue there, and I guess also like weekly. I mean, quite a lot of these people I'll spend half an hour, 40 minutes on the phone to each week. You know, we talk a lot. Those relationships are really important. A lot of them are now just like friends as well as business relationships. You know, one of our farmers, Sarah Green, you know, thinks we're sort of basically feels like we're part of their family, part of their business. And then, so that's kind of how it works. Some farmers, you know, some of the bigger guys obviously they're not going to talk to us about cropping planning. They do what they do, and we don't operate at such a big scale where they really have to program us in, if you like. And then what was the other part? So I was, so in terms of who, the sort of spread of our farmers and how much of us, you remember the question. Anyway, yeah, so some of them will be like their main customer. Almost all of them, so quite a few of the farmers will have their own bot schemes, and then they will do, but the vast majority of their stuff will go to us. And then some of the other guys, again, the bigger guys will have all their own customers. But I think, well, I know that almost all of the guys we use, because of the way we operate, and we are, we're really, farmer focused. It sounds, a bit fluffy, but it's like, we care about those guys, and we do everything we can to make sure it works for them. And as a result, even with the bigger guys, we're an important customer to them. They know that we're easy to deal with. If they've, if something's gone wrong, or they've got a problem, or they want to try and shift something extra, they'll contact us probably first out of everyone, just because we are adaptable to their thing. And I guess that's the beauty of having quite a light-footed system, if you like. We are adaptable, and we've got really understanding customers. I mean, that's the beauty of the bot schemes. They work really hard to communicate with their customers about how this whole thing works, and that's what enables us to be able to do what we do, if you like. It will be interesting, as we work more and more with local authorities and councils, how that translates, because they obviously won't have that flexibility. And it may mean that we just end up doing different things to them, but yeah, that's a really important part of it all as well, having that flexible market, I guess.
Sophie?
Yes, I'm really glad that you asked that question, actually, because this is exactly the sort of thing that the food data collaboration would like to be able to facilitate. So as long as all of those farmers were operating online in some context, that could be through a platform like Open Food Network UK, Ubi, but equally, you might have a Shopify shop online as well, and that's something which we're looking to develop integration for as well. So for any producers and retailers who are operating via Shopify, which is probably quite a large number, this is something which again could be integrated into the food data collaboration. So absolutely, that producer to producer relationship could, absolutely work.
I'm going to do the person here in the grey top sort of midway, then I'll go online, and then I'll come to you at the end there, because you had your hand up before.
Hi, Duncan from Cambridge Organic Food Company. This is my question, but something I quickly wanted to sort of get in beforehand. I sort of hate answering other people's questions. I noticed a wry smile on your face when the DP UK question came up. Anthony Davidson of Big Parn, obviously he's one of your partners now. I don't think he's directly involved with DP UK, but he was certainly on the panel that preceded it. So there seems like an obvious connection there. But the question was, Danny, in your fantastic talk, one of the things that really sort of made my ears prick up is this fact that you've actually got a bit of a two-way conversation going on with the box schemes that you supply with regards to the produce. You said about the courgettes and aubergines, you say you might go back and ask people to adjust their orders. That's actually something really significant that's happening there, because in conventional retail, the greengrocer, the supermarket, whatever, has to present their customers with abundance, a display of abundance, and without knowing what's going to be sold. So surplus is always dialed in to the conventional retail model. Box schemes have the ability to totally overcome that by being able to sort of match up or being able to balance inputs with outputs, but also being able to be flexible enough to make good use of what the growers have available and sort of balance things that way. You're doing 10, 12 sort of schemes at the moment. For that to work on a larger scale, this is where the value of the food data collaboration sort of really comes in. I think that's sort of another angle to it all that really shouldn't be overlooked. I mean, Pete, how many schemes are you working with?
43 or something.
There we go. Yeah. So if something of that nature can sort of scale up to work with more and more box schemes, that's going to really sort of hit the nail on the head when it comes to sort of mitigating food surplus, food waste sort of problems, etc. So.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think there's we've talked to Pete actually quite a bit about how we would automate what we do, and it is not simple. I can't quite get my head around how we do it. Like I can't get my head around how you would automate it, but there must be a way. And yeah, I mean, once you well, yeah, quite. Once you guys have figured that out, then you can take it anywhere. I mean, yeah, I guess that flexibility from the customer is a really important part of it, and having the sort of, because bot schemes they'll place their order, but they don't tell anyone what they're getting until it's all been confirmed. So they have that manoeuvring to be able to be, it's not like, and also, it's that model where the bot scheme customer gets what they're given. They don't have a choice in it, which is obviously, that's the whole point, right? I mean, that's to be able to allow the farmers to be able to grow what they can grow and give them to the customers. If that makes sense. Anyway.
Right, we'll go back online. So they need the mic back to Yarley here, please.
Another really quick question for Danny from Rosie online, who asks, Danny, you mentioned schools, hospitals, councils, but have mainly talked about veg boxes. Are you now supplying any public procurement or public sector organisations? And then, as that's a quick question, I just wanted to add one from Diana that mentions, so far this session is exactly why I signed up for the conference, but it's raising so many questions. Do we need some kind of permanent working group to develop these options and help them grow throughout the country?
So council, yeah. So we work with our local council. We've just started working with our local council. So Barking and Dagenham have their own catering company that we only despite working in the borough for 4 years, only discovered about 3 months ago. Anyway, they're putting together a good food plan, and as a result of that, we've started to work with them. We supplied over Christmas. We did their HAF programme, which is the Holiday and Activities Food Programme, which was it's like a programme for kids who receive free school meals but in the holidays. And we supplied them with about 1,500 veg bags / recipe boxes, whatever sort of combination of the two, which went out to those providers, and we've had some good feedback with, and that will then hopefully be an ongoing thing throughout the holidays in this year at least, until I think the programme's funded till 2024. And then also we're going to start with Barking and Dagenham hopefully in the next couple of months, but these things take time. We'll start supplying a few schools, trialling it with them, and then see where we go from there. I think, yeah, so we have started it, but it has taken, it was one of the aims that I had for it. It was why I got involved with it, was because I thought that this would be the best way to be able to work with schools and councils and hospitals. And despite wanting to do it from day one, I mean, it's taken 4 years for us to have any kind of feel like any really meaningful dialogue with any councils, and that's but that is changing, and it's a developing thing. And the net zero stuff and the good food plans, that all of that that is happening in lots of different councils, certainly in London, but I guess across the UK, is an amazing opportunity to change the food system. I mean, it's a big market. It's a £3-4 billion. That's what the public sector spends on food each year. I mean, that's giant. I mean, it's massive. It's not the whole, and if it seems to me so obvious that there's the whole public money for public goods thing. I mean, it all just fits together. So it's slow and it's painful, but it's a big reason to be hopeful.
That question about having a permanent working group, I think I'll roll that into the question to the room, and I've got some stuff to say about that as well. But we'll go to you. You've been very patient. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's Julia from Better Food Traders. I just wanted to bring in a retailer perspective. I mean, firstly, a very personal one. So I used to be a retailer in North London, ran a shop, and Better Food Shed supplied us. And from that perspective, it really was an amazing thing because, you know, the way that Danny and the shed work, it meant that we could order and know that we were getting things from farms that we kind of recognised and trusted. But also where we then needed to kind of top up with things from language, at that point, we wouldn't have been able to afford, you know, they've got a minimum spend with wholesalers, and we couldn't do that as a small shop. So being able to buy through the shed meant that we could kind of hit that minimum spend through, you know, their spend, basically. So just from a retailer perspective, these sorts of joining the dots logistics hubs are really, really useful. With my Better Food Traders hat on, we're a network, a UK-wide network representing traders. And so we're very interested in being part of that solution, at finding areas in the UK where we've got a density of members who want to work in this kind of way. And, you know, we're part of growing communities as well, so we can have those conversations with everyone there, Danny and so on, to learn how we can set these up. And as you said, you know, a working group is something I think we need to talk about. But if anyone in the room or online wants to join Better Food Traders and sort of link into a network where we can then help you link up with other traders, farmers that we know are existing in your area, then please do get in touch. Thanks.
And the person behind you, and then we'll have that discussion about how we grow more of this.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm Harriet. I'm from a charity called Plunkett Foundation. And if you have a familiarity with Plunkett, you'll probably think of shops and pubs, community-owned shops and pubs that we support. But we do also support community-owned food infrastructure businesses, so such as mills and breweries and butchers and distilleries. So my question is, what are those barriers? What can we help together? What are those challenges we can help break down together? Is it access to land? Is it access to business support? Is it access to finance that will help us see more community-owned food infrastructure businesses like abattoirs? And also, how do we find those fantastic individuals like Emma, like Danny, who are leading that on the ground? How can we help reach kind of more individuals that are willing to drive that change forward?
Definitely finance in the first instance. Like I said, we wouldn't have been able to buy the mill if we hadn't have crowdfunded for it, and we are still looking for kind of both loan and but grant primarily funding. And I don't want to exist as a business that only takes grants, because that's almost as laborious as doing the work, as finding the money. But also I think finding the, and I can only kind of talk to grain, I suppose, but finding the lots of businesses that need that same piece of infrastructure. I think there was a really interesting project that was, I think it was about €1 million. They got some money from the EU, it's maybe in Denmark, and they've basically got 2 lorries worth of kit that processes grain that can travel around. And I think we're quite small in the UK, so we could do something like that and be processing for lots of different people on farm potentially. But you've got to kind of have that critical mass of people. And I think thinking about the cleaning specifically, for us to make it viable on the community farm that I work on, it's just not. It's that we'd never get the return on investment. So I'd need to know, kind of almost have a machinery ring, I suppose, to for us to be able to share that kit. And I know that happens with kind of combine harvesters and other pieces of kit, but it is not so much for processing kit. Yeah.
I'd quite like to sort of move on to how we get more of this stuff. I mean, the idea of a working group is a really interesting one. But one of the things that I take away from this discussion is that there's a lot about it being appropriate to the locality. So what is a national discussion, if you like, about the needs re-infrastructure, what is the role of that, should it exist? And the Land Workers Alliance, in partnership with the Sustainable Food Trust and some other people, we've just been given a couple of years funding to explore some of those ideas about visions for infrastructure and all of those sorts of things. So we have an opportunity to make some of that happen. But I'm really keen that we don't have a big plan for the whole of the UK and it's not being appropriate for the localities that people are working in. It needs to be locally appropriate or regionally appropriate. There's no point in having a blueprint for the UK which doesn't work. So any comments on that? Let's go to the person right at the back there, and then we'll come to you, B.
Hi, yeah, I'm Colin Massey from the Digital Commons Cooperative, similarly named cooperative, and we're solving very similar problems but in different domains. So we're exploring interoperability, but it's primarily for directories of organizations and projects and mapping applications. And the way we're kind of approaching the problem is we're developing technology which will work across the country, but then also trialing it locally. So basically work with local projects and local regions to sort of test out the reality of it working on the ground, but making sure that it could work anywhere else. Yeah, so keeping both the sort of getting to local needs by working with local projects, but making it work across the world as well, but of course primarily across the country.
And then be here in the second row.
Rebecca Lawton, Land Workers Alliance. It occurs to me that maybe for this working group, sociocracy could be a really good tool because it's actually going to be quite a long-term thing. It's going to be a matter of years rather than sort of a year or two that this works. And actually it also needs to be sliced and diced in different ways according to regions and also sectors, because there is going to be some things that are appropriate to meat producers, some to grain producers, some to veg producers, some to retail. So sociocracy works with circles and linkages between those circles and then sub-circles. And I won't go into it in detail, but it just feels like it could be a really useful tool for joining all these different things up. So that was my comment.
I think that's a really useful pointer. We had the question online a little while ago about processing facilities and such like. Is there anyone in the room who has a take on that? How can we get more appropriate processing facilities in places?
Only to say that when we're talking about...
If you can you wait for the mic? Thank you.
Only to say, could we include storage in that too? Because I was just wondering with Danny whether it would be, whether they're doing, apples and, storage is included.
That is actually something that came up in one of the sessions yesterday. I think it might have been the retail session actually, where I think it was Dawn mentioned community-owned buildings and storage and all of those sorts of things. And it's been a quick mention from Emma, buildings, and in your situation, buildings have turned up. Certainly local councils seem to be happy to transfer assets, but we don't necessarily seem to be, our world doesn't necessarily seem to be well equipped to look at those assets and what we're going to do with it. And we don't seem to have, as a group, we don't seem to have I was going to say a link in isn't quite the right way of putting it, but we don't seem to be on the ball enough to be able to make use of those opportunities as and when they arrive. But that is one of the nuts to crack, I suppose. I'll go to you and then I'll come to you at the end there.
Just quickly to link those things together, I guess, because you said about working groups being across the country and how, one thing works for one set of people but doesn't work for another, but the learning can be shared, across. So I live in a very rural county and there are lots of things that I can see have similarities and that don't have similarities, but the joining up part, I think, in terms of buildings is exactly what I said about, you know, you've got, if you're able to do everything else digitally, and there's a shed that simply has food come in and go out on one day of the week, you've got this amazing opportunity there of a building. And if you've got processing, storage and warehousing in the same place, then you know there's only one person needs to go to the council and get that asset transferred, right? Like, you know, it reduces that admin so much. But each location would want a very different building, and I think we've probably all got experiences of buildings where they've, you know, it's been built, it looks amazing, and they've put all this stuff and they go, there you go, have this building, and actually the needs are completely against what, you know. So us talking about what we need first, and then going looking for each, you know, physical space in each area probably is what might work.
And then we'll go to the front here, and then I'll come back to you at the green top at the end.
Thanks. Gareth Hughes, also from the Food Data Collaboration, but I'm going to take that hat off for a minute. I'm in northeast Derbyshire, and the agroecological sector in that area is in its infancy. And I think these are really fantastic conversations, but I think that some areas that perhaps the approach will almost need to be that to put you know, there would be no market for these kind of things at the moment, but the market is changing, and if we can somehow facilitate these things, support these things being set up, that almost can assist in creating those markets quite rapidly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm based in northeast England, and we have the same situation. We've got so few agroecological producers who are in that space. I run a farmer's market in my spare time, and finding people within a reasonable limit is a challenge. Come to you back at the end, and then I'd quite like to go back to Yarli to see.
Girls had a hand up.
Oh right, okay. Sorry, I hadn't spotted you.
Just where your hand is.
Right. Well, we'll do you, and then I'll come to you, and then I'll come back to Yarli to see if there's any more from online.
Yes, sir, coming back again, but I know you're against a UK-wide plan, but surely what we need, you know, what we've got around in the audience here is a disparate group of people all over the country, and actually having an information bank of actually what people are doing already, where the markets are, where the box schemes are, where the gaps in the market is, where we need the processing, where you can look at a population centre and say, right, is it worth marketing in that group, and starting to work on that. And then, of course, the other question is access to land, and of course, I've got a lot to say about that, but probably not at this.
I was going to. That's a whole other session, really, isn't it?
It's another session, yeah. But
yeah,
I just think sort of mapping information, and the digital tool would be absolutely fantastic to you know, you're going to start getting information from producers and consumers, and that's going to be the basis of a potential map already.
But Tony Little, my colleague, was mentioned in Sophie's presentation. He suggested something similar, but it needs to be a live map, because things are changing all the time and stuff is happening. Yeah. I mean, I'm not against a national plan or a UK national plan, a variety of UK national plans. I can just see that there is potential difficulty with having an overarching thing, because it has to, as we seem to have agreed, it has to work in its individual localities. But the idea of mapping is something that is worth exploring a bit further.
Thank you.
Red hat.
Hello. Thought the red hat would make me obvious. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your experiences. I think we'll all know that the market has been changing, and particularly during the pandemic, we saw a massive increase in people taking up box schemes. We saw lots of stores opening, sort of zero plastic stores, because we could get flour. Everyone was making sourdough at home. And even in Bristol, we had the Bristol Food Network, we had Farms to Feed us, all starting to understand that it's really important that we actually join these links together and start talking to one another. We know there's a cost of living crisis is happening, and so that people's investment in their food will drop. So for you as businesses and organisations, what do you see the risk of the cost of living crisis to your setup? Is there anything you're trying to do to mitigate that? And what do you think you play a role in mitigating that risk to the producers and the people who are sort of supplying your organisations and businesses?
That's something that all of us can have a go at. Emma, would you like to have a go at it first?
Yeah. So people are less keen to spend pounds, plural, on a kilo of flour than they are on spending it on a kilo of anything else. So it's a really difficult price point, and I'm still trying to work out how to make a milling business work on its own. And I'm not sure that it does really. And I actually produce pasta as well, because that's basically flour and water and an extruder, and I can get kind of £8 per kilo more than I can for flour, which is crazy. And people eat pasta every week. But I think the point about, I suppose, if you take everything online, then you miss that kind of direct relationship with the customer. And so I know Kim at her bakery kind of knows most of her customers by name, and therefore they're really invested in her, and they're really invested in the stories of the millers and the farmers that she works with. And therefore I think are more likely to be able to, or more committed, I suppose, to paying through a cost of living crisis. And taking away that face-to-face might be kind of difficult, and I don't think everybody wants that. So still having kind of retailers where people could go to means that maybe they're more likely to carry on going through these difficult times.
Sophie?
So I think really the strength of the food data collaboration in respect to the cost of living crisis is that not only is it helping to make that supply chain process more streamlined and hopefully more efficient, less time consuming for producers, but ultimately, you know, we know it's a really difficult time for the businesses in terms of, you know, potentially losing their customer bases fairly rapidly. So by being able to provide an infrastructure that's going to help them to be able to do better work, that really probably is the main contribution from the food data collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the cost of living crisis has. Yeah, I mean, bot schemes are struggling. It's really hard at the moment. I think generally it's a case of just hanging in there and getting through the next year or two to an extent. But it is, yeah, I mean, it is worrying. I don't think, I mean, I still feel like the direction of travel is only going one way. We're not going to go back to more and more. I don't think we're going back to more and more industrial farming. The rabbit's out of the hat, so to speak. Everybody knows. There are conversations that now are totally mainstream that 10 years ago were pretty fringe, you know. Like, so we're only going in one direction, but it is, you know, it is about just hanging in there until this eases. I mean, certainly we mitigate the risk to our farmers, I think, in a relatively effective way. But it is, yeah, I mean, you know, it's hard if you don't have anybody to sell your veg to, then you can't sell any veg. I mean, the really sort of, I'll come back to the public procurement stuff, because that is the other, you know, they are obviously under huge amounts of pressure as well. Everyone is, but they also have an obligation now to be thinking about the way they spend their money and how they're spending it. You know, the circular economy thing, all of that kind of like reinvestment in local economies, that all fits with local food. Small, short supply chains, you know, they're like the buzzwords that those guys are really into at the moment. So, yeah, and that fits with this whole movement. So there is like, you know, we're going to pivot slightly towards that stuff over the next couple of years, and hopefully that will help support the farmers to get through this phase, and you know, we can continue to support the bot schemes as best we can, and hope that they are able to keep the doors open, I guess, basically.
I would sort of reiterate quite a lot of the points made. There is an element of hanging on in there, but I think collectively as a movement, we do well to keep looking forward and to keep working together to make sure that when we get out of this, and I'm sure we will, because we've been through these things before, and we might lose a few people along the way, and that's tragic for individual cases, but the direction of travel is clear. And if we can come out of it stronger with a better plan to be delivering more of the stuff we've heard about, and the things that we haven't heard about, the things that are in the room, the processing, the storage, the more distribution across the 4 UK nations and beyond, then we're in a better place. So the long-term vision and hanging on to that, I think, is really important. So those of us in a position to be able to do that, to work on that, need to make use of this time and this space to do that. One of the things that struck me yesterday was that in the context of the Sustainable Food Places session that I was at, we've got all these Sustainable Food Places partnerships across the nations. That's potentially a vehicle to do some of these circle things, to look at what's the infrastructure need in specific places appropriate to those areas. Now, that might need facilitation, it might need funding and all of those sorts of things, but perhaps we should be working with the SFP network to explore that as an idea, and then bring all of that together for a sort of a larger vision, if you like. Because what happens in Dumfries and Galloway and in Herefordshire and in London or the edge of Kent is going to be different. We've more or less come to the end of our time. I'm really pleased you've stuck the course. That's a good start. I'm really pleased that my voice has held out, because I wasn't quite sure that was going to happen. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for those of you online who've joined us. I hope you've taken something out of it. And if you want to be more engaged in this stuff, you want to be involved in developing some of these circles and some of these ideas, either in your own locality or beyond, come and talk to me or find me or any of us. You can find me on the Land Workers Alliance website, and then just email me and we'll see where we take it from there. Brill, thank you.